are now simulcasting the radio show for the next 2 hours and 52 minutes at prisonplanet.tv. Then we have John McManus here in studio with us. I am very, very excited about that. The president of the John Birch Society in studio with us until I think 5 after next hour. So we'll get a full hour on air with him. Then we've got some other interesting guests coming on. Patrice O'Neill, who's an African-American and popular comedian. He's been criticizing Obama and promoting the Obama deception when he goes on national media outlets. So we'll see how that goes for his career. But that is coming up. You know, there's so much I'd like to talk to you about, and it's great that you were coming through Texas on this tour and that somebody had the idea that we should contact you and have you here. I've had you on a few times over the phone. But Mr. McManus, it is just great to meet you in person, and I appreciate your tireless work at the John Birch Society over the last 40 years.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. I tell people all the time I wouldn't miss this fight for anything.
Boy, I tell you, everything you guys talked about has unfortunately come true. Talk a little bit about yourself, your 40-plus years there, what the John Birch Society is for folks that don't know, and then the tour. Let's get that out of the way now because folks want to write this down and find out where they can come hear you speak. Excellent speaker, very informative, and it's all documented, the issues you cover. And then let's get into what the New World Order is and what we're facing.
Well, on a personal level, I did 3 years in the Marine Corps after college as a lieutenant, and then I was an electronics engineer, and I joined the society as a local member in the early 60s. In 1964, they asked me to take a staff position. It was 66. So I've been on the staff of the Birch Society for 43 years. I worked alongside Robert Welch as his public relations director all during the 70s and into the 80s until he passed away in 1985. In 1991, they named me president. I'm the head of the society in one respect, but we have a CEO also, a fellow named Art Thompson, and we work very closely together. So I've been everything you could imagine in the Birch Society. I've been a writer and a speaker and a publicist and a radio and television guy. I've written 5 books. I've done everything you could expect of somebody as long as I've been in the Birch Society, and it's been an absolute delight. As I said, I wouldn't miss this for anything.
And it was the John Birch Society that really gets the credit first, and that's why you got demonized in a big way, explaining, no, they control both parties. It's a foreign cartel. Here's their own documents. They want a Bank of the World that will regulate all the nation states. Now that's Time Magazine, Newsweek, the Financial Times of London, and now for world government. The very people engineering the economic collapse are openly announcing world government. I guess you guys aren't so kooky after all for researching.
No, not at all. You know, I wrote a book in 1993 called Financial Terrorism, Hijacking America Under the Threat of Bankruptcy. And in my book in 93, I laid out many, many statements of prominent people who were saying, well, what we need is world government. What we got to have is world government. And I've gotten calls from people, a couple of call-in show people who said that they've just simply come across my book recently, and I'm a prophet. They said, no, I'm not a prophet at all. I said, all I did was some homework, and I did what Robert Welch always said. He said, just project the lines. If you project the lines, you can arrive at the conclusions that are coming. That's what we do in the Birch Society, and I hate to say it, but we predicted all of what's happening here in the economic malaise that our country's involved in. And it sure is a malaise. You know, one of the things I quote, you'd be interested in this, when Paul Volcker was named to be the head of the Federal Reserve back in 1979, he testified before the U.S. Senate, and he said the standard of living of the average American has to come down. I don't think you can escape that. And you got to ask yourself, why would any American want the standard of living of the average American to come down? And the answer is very simple. If the United States is way up high and the rest of the world is down here, you got to bring the U.S. down and bring the others up so that we can be comfortably merged into the New World Order. And that's what Volcker said. He said that before the U.S. Senate. They didn't challenge him. They said, fine, you're approved. You go lead the Federal Reserve. And he's a bad man in my view. And now he's back in the White House. Wonderful.
Again, where do you have to be later, because I don't think that the 40 minutes of airtime we're going to have is enough. Perhaps I can keep you 15 minutes in the next hour, and we can move the next guest back, because we could talk for a whole hour just about your book and their own documents. And you're right, back in the early 90s, you guys knew what their battle plan was even then, and the proof's in the pudding. You've been, proven correct. Specifically, start over in more detail. Go over your book, how they operate, how they're on record writing hundreds of books themselves, thousands of white papers, admitting their dastardly deeds.
Well, I quoted Brzezinski, and I quoted Kissinger, and I quoted Volcker, and I quoted Bergston, the head of the economic thing down there in Washington, and all these people. They're all saying the same thing. And I don't know why it is that back then only the Birch Society was able to say, hey, put this all together. Look, this is where they're heading. They want world government. Now, one of the points that I like to make, and why the Birch Society became so controversial, is that we say it's a conspiracy. We say, look, these people don't have an ideology. They're part of a conspiracy. They don't believe in anything other than power. They don't believe in the Communist Manifesto. They don't believe in the Constitution. They don't believe in Scripture. They don't believe in anything. They only want power. And it's a devilish determination to take power over mankind. One of the ways of doing that is economically. Was Meyer Amschel Rothschild, the founder of the famous Rothschild banking empire. He said, give me control of a nation's money, I care not who makes the laws, because that person will make the laws as I want them made. And that's where we are. So they have control of the money. Now, the Federal Reserve has to go. And happily, there's a bill in Congress now, H.R. 833, to get rid of the Federal Reserve. I would like everybody who's listening to write to your congressman and say, please co-sponsor H.R. 833. And if that happens, the bill is a responsible thing. It says from the enactment of this bill, 1 year, the Federal Reserve shall stand abolished. In other words, it's not going to be an overnight thing. It's a responsible piece of legislation. Glad to see it.
Well, Ron Paul's got another bill to just audit the thing.
Yeah, it's never been audited.
Can you speak to that fact? And then even Senator Sanders, just a few weeks ago, said to Bernanke, he said, where's the trillions of dollars? And Bernanke said, I'm not going to tell you.
No, I'm not going to tell you. Yeah. Most Americans have no idea that the Federal Reserve is a private agency. It's not a government agency, and that's amazing. Right? You go to Washington, D.C., and you pull out that big phone book they have, and they have blue pages for all the federal agencies, and the Federal Reserve's not there. It's not a federal agency, and they take dictation from no one. They don't answer the questions they don't want to answer, as you just mentioned, and on you go. Now, the Fed has never been audited, and I had an interesting thing happen to me. I said that in a speech about a year ago. A guy wrote me a letter, and he sent me a little newspaper clipping talking about the Fed had been audited. And I did some investigation, and I found out what they'd audited was the number of desks and the number of pencils and the number of file cabinets and so on. They didn't go into any of the financial end of it, and so effectively the Fed has still never been audited. Ron Paul has a bill, and that one's H.R. 1207, to audit the Fed. And I understand that there's a lot of people jumping aboard co-signing this one. They're up to about something like 35 co-signers already, co-sponsors. That's good. I would love to see an audit of the Fed. I'd like to know what they've got for wealth and what they do with it and how they operate and so forth. But we don't know. We don't know because it's a private agency and they thumb their nose at government.
Did you see the clip on the NewsHour with former Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan when he said, look, the president, the legislative, the Congress, no one can even question us or look at us, because he was asked, what's your relationship to the government? And he said, there is none. We are a, quote, separate agency and are non-reviewable. So, I mean, we know our Constitution. We know our Bill of Rights. We know the separation of powers. It's all three branches reviewing each other, tying down dominant men. And just here is this private Federal Reserve dancing around in public, arrogantly saying, we're not only secret and you can't audit us, no agency of government can even look at us, and we're going to set up a new bank of the world that you pay your taxes to. I mean, this is just
tyranny. It's tyranny. Absolutely. It's absolutely wrong. Now, you know, the idea for it came from the Communist Manifesto, plank number 5. And that's the Communist Manifesto says a central bank with state control and so on. And we've gone one worse than Karl Marx. We've outmarxed Marx. He said in the hands of the state, we say, no, it's a private agency. Ours is worse than what Karl Marx even wanted.
But as you pioneered exposing at the JBS, and I've seen the government documents, congressional testimony, it was really the big central banks to con the public into slavery, the people's paradise, that financed communism. So, of course, you're going to have public education, and, of course, you're going to have a central bank, and, of course, you're going to have federal control. All the things in that Communist Manifesto, that's what the governments of the world follow when they're under the control of the private banks, and their enemy is the Bill of Rights and Constitution.
Absolutely. The 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto, all are partially or fully in place in the United States today. It all happened in the 20th century. Number 10, free education for all children in the government schools. And I like to tell my audience, I said, now, if the government's going to control the schools, do you think they're going to teach anything that will impact government power? And the answer is no. I say, if a Hindu starts a school, is he going to teach Lutheranism? No. If a government starts a school, they're going to teach government power and want government power to be preached and taught and not impacted by the schools they control. Very simple. One of the great reasons for hope in our country is so many people are going to homeschooling. And the more of that, the better.